Greetings, peoples of the interwebs, Jake here, and this is a solo review that I'll be doing on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. I just saw that earlier today, and for those of you wondering why I'm doing a solo review and not doing it with the rest of the Paisley Pill team, that's just because, with our schedules, we weren't able to do the review, like, right after we saw the movie. So I'm just going to do a solo review. It's just kind of like, my initial thoughts and reaction to the movie. And then the next podcast we do, it'll be a more in-depth discussion on what we thought about the movies, the things we didn't like, things we liked, and all that stuff. So I'll be sure to update you all when that gets uploaded, when we record that. But anyways, so let's get started. So overall, I thought the movie was kind of a letdown. Now, I didn't hate the movie by any means. It's just, for me, because there are a lot of things to like about this movie. But for me personally, there were just a lot more things I didn't like. So, before you start, sending hateful comments on how I'm wrong and how, I'm stupid or whatever for not caring much for the movie, just hear me out first, then by all means send your hate. So, like I said, there are definitely things to like about the movie. Because again, it's not a bad movie. Just for me, it was just okay. And with other movies, if they just turn out okay, it's whatever. But for Batman v Superman, that essentially this is one of the biggest movies, superhero movies. Especially with DC, the first time we're seeing Batman and Superman on screen together is amazing, and the expectations were so high, not just for me, but just for the entire, not just the comic community, people who love reading comics like myself, but just for the world in general, who like pop culture and like Superman and Batman, whether they are comic readers or whatever. This was a pretty big deal, and so initially when I heard about this movie, the casting and stuff like that, it's been a huge roller coaster of emotions for me. But that's a whole other thing that I'll probably go more in depth into in the podcast that we do. But basically, I will say this: I guess I'll start with some of the things that I did like, and then move on to some of the negatives, and I guess just overall kind of try and round it out. So the things that I did like, visuals, of course, were really good, because Zack Snyder, he's really good at visuals, and I really actually enjoyed Ben Affleck as Batman, and I will wholeheartedly admit that I was one of those people where I hated the idea that Ben Affleck was going to play Batman when they first announced that, and I'm glad he completely changed my mind. I really am. And even though towards, the last couple months I'd started to warm up to Ben Affleck being Batman, I still wasn't completely sold on the concept, and I was still kind of iffy. But after seeing the movie, I can confidently say Ben Affleck is probably one of the best Batmen we've had in a live-action adaptation. Not only as Bruce Wayne, he was great as Bruce Wayne, really good as Batman. The suit that he had, both suits, the kind of classic Batman suit and the mech suit, the most comic accurate costume we've had in any live adaptation, which is always a plus. The classic black and gray, and he was just a total badass as Batman. Although I did have a bit of an issue with the fact that in this universe, Batman seems to have no problem killing, which I understand that to a degree, because again, this is an older Batman. He's, he's seen a lot of stuff. He's been around for like 20 years as Batman. So I get, like, in terms of like storytelling, why he wouldn't have any qualms with killing at this point in his career. It makes sense, but at the same time, I also didn't really like that, just because when they do inevitably do a standalone Batman movie, which they seem to be very adamant about doing, which I'm all for, Whenever it comes out, I keep hearing like around 2018, 19. But I keep hearing that uh, or whenever that movie comes out, whatever the storyline is, presumably the Joker will probably be the main antagonist of that movie, because the Joker is the most popular and most iconic Batman villain, and possibly even one of the most iconic villains in comic history in general. But I guess like my issue with Batman killing is, so okay, it's one thing like if he's just like mowing down street thugs, but when he comes up against the Joker, again presumably, or really whoever the villain may be in the solo Batman movie, it's like, what's to prevent him from killing the Joker or whoever the villain may be in the standalone Batman movie? And for some people, they may not have a problem with that, but that is very much a core of the modern Batman that we've all come to know and love. Is he's got that no killing policy, and so like again, if he's cool with just mowing down like these street thugs, no problem, then I feel like that almost takes out the complexity and dynamic between Batman and his and his villains, in particular the Joker. Is, you know, if the first scene Joker shows up, it's just like Batman could just kill him and have no problem with that at all. So I guess this is like, that's kind of my one issue with the Ben Affleck Batman. Aside from that, again, I loved it. Probably one of the most comic accurate Batman we've ever seen in live action. And again, he did a really good job. Henry Cavill was really good as Superman. I just wish that they had kind of fleshed him out a little bit more, because I do think that they overshadowed him a bit with Batman. And again, I get that. But I think they could have maybe balanced those two characters and their storylines out a little bit more. But again, one of the positives I'll say about the movie is the casting was all really good. You know, all the cast did great. And even though I absolutely hated Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, he did fine in terms of his acting ability. I hated him as Lex Luthor. That was the worst casting choice in that entire movie, and I'll be honest, anytime he was on screen, I was pretty much just signed in. Just I didn't like it at all. He took me out of the movie. And I didn't like the angle they were going with in this iteration of Lex Luthor. And again, I know people, you know, have been defending this cast, him as Lex Luthor, and they're like, oh no, it's a different universe, so it's a different version of Lex Luthor. And again, I totally get that. I just think this was the wrong direction to go with the character. And again, I'll go more into detail on that as to why I absolutely hated that casting choice. Gal Gadot, who played Wonder Woman, I was very worried about her acting abilities going into the movie, just because she was a former model and she hasn't done a whole lot of acting, and just in the past, models usually don't transition well into acting. Now, she wasn't great, but also she didn't have a whole lot to work with, because she didn't have a whole lot of screen time, in particular speaking, like actually lines in the movie. So I'm not going to completely hold it against her. But the lines she did have in the movie were a little wooden. I think she maybe could have added a bit more emotion to her lines. But that being said, I thought she was serviceable in the movie. She looked really good as Wonder Woman. I just think that, like, maybe, I don't know, they either could have given her a bit more lines in the movie, or I don't know, maybe she could have done a little bit better with her lines. But again, that being said, overall I didn't really have much of a problem with her. And I am actually looking forward to seeing her in her solo movie, which comes out next year. So, like, again, casting was all pretty much good, even though I hated the characterization of Lex Luthor in this movie. Jesse Eisenberg did fine acting, and honestly, I would have been fine with him in the movie, so long as he was not playing Lex Luthor. Like, if he was playing any other character, that would have been fine, but since he was playing Lex Luthor, I hated it. But again, I could go into more detail on that, but I'm going to try and keep this relatively short. But I guess, and I guess, the action sequences were pretty cool. The fight scenes between, like, Batman and Superman. But the actual fight scene itself between those two was way too short. It was probably 5 or 6 minutes. And for a film called Batman v Superman, there wasn't a whole lot of verses in there. Like, it was more, I mean, sure, yeah, they fought and it was more of an ideological battle. But even still, I would have liked to seen them either fight longer or maybe have multiple fights. Like, maybe, one fight earlier in the movie and then a second fight later on. And so, I guess I'll kind of transition to things that I didn't like. The story, I didn't like. The story was kind of all over the place. It was basically like they had 5 different movies in one, because it was essentially like a direct sequel to Man of Steel storyline, a solo Batman storyline, little bits of Wonder Woman, kind of a Lex Luthor story, and then like a Superman Doomsday storyline. And so they just didn't really flow well together. Like, there was not a real cohesive story. It was just kind of several stories that just kind of came together in a turn of events. The pacing I didn't really care for that much. A lot of the movie, sadly, I found kind of boring and just really slow. And even several of the scenes were just overall inconsequential. I feel like they could have been cut from the movie to flesh out some of the other aspects of it. And so, pacing, story, there wasn't a whole lot there, and again, I feel like they were just trying to cram way too much into this movie. Then Doomsday was just awful. I hated Doomsday. I know he did evolve like he does in the comics. He started to kind of like grow bigger and stronger and stuff like that, and get more like horns and spikes on him like in the comics. But he still just looked awful. I hated the way Doomsday looked, and even though there's not a whole lot to Doomsday the character, even in the comics, I still feel like he could have been a better villain. But in this movie, he was essentially just a throwaway villain. He shows up pretty much at the very tail end of the movie, naturally, to bring Batman, Superman together, and then, of course, Wonder Woman shows up as well, just so that way they can kind of be like, okay, we're friends now, let's go fight this bigger threat. And again, I get it, it's Dawn of Justice, so it's laying the foundation to the Justice League, but I just feel like they could have handled that better. And the fight scenes, there are some cool scenes in the Doomsday fight, but overall it was still... I don't know, it wasn't as satisfactory as I would have hoped. And so... I don't know, like, there are just so many things I didn't like about the movie. So I hate to say it, because I really wanted this movie to work, because I love DC, and I really wanted DC to start off strong, really bring their A game, so that way they can compete with Marvel, and so that way they can really just keep this comic book movie, this boom of comic book movies and TV shows, to keep it going strong. I'm not saying like this movie will like drastically affect the whole comic book movie genre, because the movie's gonna do well financially. I don't know, critically it's kind of divided. Half the people like it, then the other half are like me and didn't really care for it, or they're just kind of indifferent, which I guess is probably more I'm more indifferent, but that's kind of a problem though, that this is their essentially their foundation to really springboard off into their DC film universe. And even if the movie does well financially, which obviously it will, because it's Batman versus Superman, A lot of people have been waiting to see this. Some people have been waiting their whole lives. But again, critically, not the best way to start off your universe when half the people like it, half the people don't like it. So though I don't think it'll affect the future DC movies all that much, which is good. Because I know next up is the Suicide Squad, which I think that movie will do really well. I'm actually really excited for that. I've actually been more excited for that than Batman v Superman for a while, sadly. Or on the part of Batman v Superman. So I think Suicide Squad will do well, and then I think Wonder Woman will do pretty well. But Justice League for me is another thing that I'm a little worried about, because Zack Snyder is still going to direct that. And even though I like most of Zack Snyder's movies he's done in the past, even though, again, they've pretty much all been critically divided, I like 300, I loved Watchmen, I like Man of Steel. I know Man of Steel is another one of those critically divided movies. I'm one of the people who liked the movie. I thought it was really enjoyable, I liked it. So really, Zack Snyder, I've liked most of his movies aside from Sucker Punch. That was a piece of shit, and I didn't like that one. But honestly, Zack Snyder is not the strongest director. He does really good with visuals, and that's his strong point. But in terms of storytelling and everything else, he's not the best. He's not a horrible director by any means. But I feel like you need to bring in someone else to direct Justice League who has a better track record in terms of movies. Like a director who's had, say, 3-4 good movies, right in a row, rather than... Because, again, Zack Snyder's done well with his movies. Financially, they've all made their money back. But, again, you gotta... To have a successful movie, especially for something like this DC universe, I feel like if they really want to compete with Marvel, they gotta do well financially, and they have to do well with their storytelling and their pacing and all that stuff, and their directing. So I'm perfectly fine with Snyder staying on as a co-director or producer with the rest of the DC movies, but I don't think he should direct. Nothing against him personally. Again, I like most of his movies. He's fine, but I just think they need to get somebody else to direct Justice League. So that's more or less my opinions on the movie. And again, I really, really hate the fact that this movie kind of let me down, because I wanted it to do well for so many reasons. Because again, I love DC. I like most of the characters in the movie. And again, I like the cast overall. They're all really good. And even Jeremy Irons, I thought was great as Alfred. Probably one of the best Alfreds we've had in a live-action movie. But again, they just didn't quite deliver everything else for me personally. And I can definitely see why people love the movie, or they like it. 'Cause I know some of my friends say it's one of their favorite comic book movies. Totally understandable. I can definitely see why people like it. Just for me personally, I was really let down. And again, I'm really not trying to sound like a DC hater, and I'm sure there are people who probably think I am, because I'm just, for the most part, saying negative things about the movie. But that's just my opinion. DC can do way better than even Man of Steel and Dawn of Justice. I feel like they can do better than what the two movies they had. And I know 2 movies isn't a whole lot to judge from, but I don't know. I just feel like they really need to kind of step up their game with the rest of their movies. But again, that being said, even though I didn't care that much for Batman v Superman, I am actually still really looking forward to the rest of the DC movies to see how they build upon their universe and delve into these other characters like Wonder Woman and her solo movie, Aquaman, and then the Justice League. So I'm really curious and looking forward to seeing how they develop this and hopefully build a grand, expansive universe. Because DC has got a lot of great characters and a lot of great stories that I would love to see adapted into live action. So that pretty much wraps this up. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this. And please let me know what you thought about the movie. Even if you completely disagree with me, let me know in the comments why, what made you really enjoy the movie, and hopefully we can have a civil discussion about our differences with the movie and not just shout at each other in the comment section. So thanks for listening, everybody, and be sure to keep up with the channel, so that way when we do the full review and podcast on Batman v Superman, you'll hopefully enjoy that a little bit more, because I know my other co-host felt a bit more positively about the movie. And again, we'll go a bit more in depth on the movie and the continuation of the DC universe. So thanks, everybody, and until next time, cheers.